and storm drainage easements for 796 Interchange Drive. 4J, Transportation Services, award bid 2021 sidewalk repair project. 4K, Community and Neighborhood Services, master agreement with the Holland Historic Trust, Holland Museum. 4L, Finance, Industrial Development District, set public hearing to create an industrial development district at 1870 Transport Lane, July 7, 2021, regular meeting. 4M, Finance, tax abatement, set public hearing for PA 198 tax abatement for Profile Tool, 196 Russell Court, July 7, 2021, regular meeting. 4N, Management Administrative Services, Human Resources, fiscal year 2022 non-union wage adjustment proposal. 4O, Management and Administrative Services, Downtown Development Authority Board appointments. 4P, Management and Administrative Services, revocable license agreement, projecting sign, 48 East 8th Street.
Great. Thank you, Kathy. Is there any member of the audience that would like to have an item removed from the consent agenda and placed onto the regular agenda? Seeing none. Any member of council that would like to have an item removed from the consent agenda and placed on the regular agenda? Seeing none there. What is the pleasure of council in regard to the consent agenda?
Motion to adopt agenda as presented.
Thank you, Mr. Trethewey. Is there support?
Support.
Support by Mr. Hoekstra. Any discussion? And Kathy, would you please call the roll?
Peters? Yes. Garcia?
Yes.
Trethewey?
Yes.
Arnshorst?
Yes.
Corbin? Yes. Hoekstra?
Yes.
Raymond?
Yes.
Mayor Box?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you. Next item is public comment. In every one of our public meetings here in the City of Holland, as a matter of fact, statewide, all of our boards, committees, and commissions, we provide an opportunity under the Open Meetings Act for members of the public to communicate to council or to those members of boards or committees or commissions. You may speak to council on any item that you would like to. We do have some guidelines that we have you follow, though. With our regular meetings, you are limited to 5 minutes. We will be keeping track of the time, and there are 3 lights on the dais in front of me. There's a question as to whether they're working appropriately tonight, so we'll see how those go. There's a green light, a yellow light, and a red light. Green light means you're doing well on time. Yellow light means that you have 1 minute left, and the red light means that your time has expired, and then we would ask that you stop. We are very strict about that as well. Also, one of the guiding principles of this council is civil discourse. We have made a commitment to be civil with one another. We have made a commitment to be civil to you. We would ask that you do the same as well. So we have had a couple of instances in recent days where there have been profanity from the podium. Please, no profanity. Please address council directly. Do not address other members of the audience. And also, please note that this is one-way communication. This is not, you may ask whatever questions you like, but this is not a time where we would be answering questions or engaging in any discussion. Now, having said that, is there anyone who would like to address council at this time? Right in the front, please come forward. And would you please state your name and address for the record?
Yes, my name is April Beatty, and I live at 985 Bluebell Drive, and I'm coming from the Holland Climate Collaborative. Members of Council, thank you for supporting the ongoing discussion of Holland's energy future. Thank you for affirming, too, that the Community Energy Plan is a living document which requires periodic review and recalibration. The Community Energy Plan itself is a present example of Holland's long-standing tradition of investing in its own future. In 1916, Council appropriated $15,000 to inaugurate Holland Hospital. 100 years later, that initial investment produced a multi-million-dollar world-class community resource. Early on, Holland understood the importance of nurturing our native entrepreneurial spirit. Decades of strategic planning and financial policy has built an industrial base which is the envy of Michigan. We know how to invest in the future. In the 1970s, Holland became a national leader when it launched its downtown redevelopment plan. We know what we value, and we know how to hold on to it. 40 years later, Nobody questions the value of that investment. The subtext for each one of these projects was a counter-argument which questioned the cost of investment. In retrospect, we can see, however, that the future favored the bold. Today's strategic review of the Community Energy Plan represents a similar historical inflection point for this community. The future economy belongs to those communities which address the climate crisis. There's no way around it. Securing the future will require investment, big, bold investment. We needn't panic, nor should we be overly cautious. In every instance, this community found that it had the resources to do what it had to do. The 2017 opening of Holland Energy Park is a $240 million illustration of that fact. We are not a poor community. We have resources. The Holland Climate Collaborative is asking Council to set the course for bold action once again. We need to cut our community's greenhouse gas emissions by 50% in each decade by 2050. We recognize that this request represents a heavy lift, both financially and administratively. We recognize also, however, that the cost of not doing so will be even higher, like way higher. One would be tempted to assume that the Community Energy Plan is all about energy policy and finance. The most important word in the title, however, is community. We live here. We don't want to be anywhere else. This is our home. The Holland Climate Collaborative is asking you to create the pathway that lets us participate in our own future. We want to invest in Holland's future too, but we need Council to create the administrative and financial structures which enable us to do just that. Please give us a chance, and thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to address council at this time? Yes, sir, in the back.
There's a lot of you. Sorry. There's a lot of you here that know who I am.
Yeah, but we would ask that you state your name and address for the
My
record,
name is
please.
Israel Izzy Quintanilla. I live at 12830 Parkway, Sapphire Parkway, north side of Holland. I've been a resident of Holland for 40 years. I went to Holland schools. I graduated out of Zealand in '94, and I became an entrepreneur. Since I was an entrepreneur, I have opened and one way or another failed at several opportunities in life because I have taken an opportunity where I did everything on my own because I didn't have anybody there for me. I was born as a heroin baby, and I was given up at birth, and I was power planted to Fyersburg, Michigan. And it's very, very hard for me to be standing up here right now addressing this board when I have done this before online. I really thought that for some reason this community would give me an opportunity to explain my story and look into it. And again and again and again for over 2 years, I have knocked on these doors. I have knocked on the police department's doors. I have knocked on so many doors that I finally am glad this corona thing is done. I'm not wearing the mask because I don't have my shot. I'm wearing my mask because I'm afraid to catch what I'm going to catch in this room. Because I'm offended about how this community has addressed the issues of reliable sports. All we sell is fun. I was unlawfully removed from my premises on May 8th, 2019. There was a sanction from your inspector's office for 45 days of condemnation. Somehow, it was magically pushed off to the side and there was no merits, and somehow, magically, the court was never notified, and somehow or another, I ended up on the street and I was made out to be a fool. Prior to that, there were some people in this community that didn't like me buying their toy store. In 1932, when Reliable Sports was opened by the Voss family, which, by the way, I have utter respect for Ken Voss. He is still standing by my side even today. That's a good man, and he's got great things coming for him. But what I need to understand is how this community can go on deaf ears and repeatedly just think this is going to go away. I'm not going to go away, and I came here knowing that I've lost everything. I can't feed my family. I can't do anything for my people for a simple fact that every time I try to open a business, every time I try to do something, HPD's in my way. You had an officer named Brian Eller that's still currently an officer that was set up and sent into my store hoping that I was not going to deliver. In the meantime, Ron Vanderveen, which is in this room, my attorney, I filed criminal charges to the Holland Police Department. By law, it's supposed to go from the police department to the detective department to the prosecutor's office, not to the detective's office to go back to Ron Vanderveen, so it shows up in the prosecutor's office a year later. Brian Eller committed 2 felonies against me, and they were pushed off to the side and lied to about how I gave up. I dismissed the charges. I want to see where in writing, in my signature, showing that I signed off on that, because by law you have to. I pressed charges, and I never dropped the charges. That man came in with every intention to have me walk out of that store in handcuffs with a minimum of 20-year felony. Yes, I have a lengthy criminal record, but it's a white-collar criminal. I'm not offensive. I've never had a violent crime in my life. I have 3 children. I have a daughter that's in the Air Force, God bless her, representing us in Germany right now. I have a son deploying. I have a son going boot camp August 23 to serve for the Marines. I have another son that's coming up right behind them. I've built soldiers for this country that we live in free. And what do I get in return? To go on deaf ears. Well, I've got facts, again, and I'm here right now to be told, guess what? I got 1 minute left. I want to know what this board's going to do, because I'll sit here and I'll come back again and again and again. But can this town admit that they made a mistake and they want to help me get Reliable back open again, or at least help me become a provider for my family again? I'm broke, and unfortunately, I'm blaming this community for that. So do something about it. That's all I have to say. Good luck.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to address council at this time? Yes, right in the second row. And would you please state your name and address for the record?
Just 1 second.
Sure.
Yes, I am Krista Anderson, and I live at 323 West 30th Street. And I first want to start by saying I am very grateful for the work that each and every one of you do as our city council. You put time and energy into making our city a remarkable place, and I really thank you for that. I genuinely appreciate also the opportunity to share and speak with you today. I am here as a Holland resident who is very concerned about the future of our planet, and my hope is that you, as our city council, will help us make Holland do its part to save our planet. As Jonathan Foer writes in We Are the Weather, climate change is not an easy story to tell. It's very complex with lots of pieces. And it's not really a good story to tell either. It's kind of dull and distant from our own experience much of the time. We don't feel immersed in it or viscerally impacted by it, so it can be really difficult for even thoughtful, politically engaged people who want to act. Let's not be that city that sees the problem but doesn't do the hard work to take action steps to make change. We absolutely have the opportunity to make change right here in Holland with our community energy plan. We can make changes and be a model for other communities. We hope you, as our city council, will ensure that the community energy plan for Holland has goals that reflect scientific standards in the Paris Climate Accord. This includes reducing carbon emissions in Holland by 50% each decade. To meet this goal, we must shift to electrify and renewable energy. Let's look at one possibility, starting with furnaces. Imagine if we attempted to replace the conventional furnaces in 500 Holland homes each year with heat pumps. Using city records, we could identify residences with older heating and cooling equipment in need of replacement. Then we could use marketing and financial incentives targeted to these 500 households such that at least 100 homeowners, or 20%, would opt in for a new heat pump instead of a fossil fuel-powered unit. Perhaps the City of Holland could even commit to buying 100 air source heat pumps and then offer discounts for purchase by Holland residents on a first-come, first-served basis. We've done the math, and this would result in approximately $500 in savings to each of these households every year, thanks to higher efficiency heating and cooling. It would also generate and divert about $1 million in new fuel switch revenue away from Semco to Holland BPW. Big picture, it would lower Holland's collective carbon footprint. This is just one possibility of many to move toward electrifying and renewable energy. The overview effect is the term used when astronauts are able to look at the Earth from outer space. This experience has often impacted astronauts remarkably. They often feel overcome with emotion and awareness of how Earth is our home and has kept us safe. Our planet protects us from the harshness of space, provides us with air to breathe, food to eat, water to drink. We are not protecting it from the harshness of us. Humanity consumes natural resources at a rate 50% greater than the Earth's ability to produce them. According to the World Wildlife Fund, 2/3 of the Earth's wildlife has disappeared in just the last 50 years. Our planet is headed for disaster. Again, Jonathan 4. Our relationship to the planet is a near-death experience that doesn't feel like one. By saving our planet, we save ourselves. Holland needs to do our part to save our planet, and we can. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to address council at this time? Yes, ma'am. And would you please state your name and address for the record?
My name is Mary Johnson, and I live at 672 Larkwood Drive. I also would like to thank you for your leadership and all your many hours of work on behalf of our community. And I thank you for allowing me to speak to you. I need to tell you this evening that I am very fearful of the horrific consequences that await us if our world does not adequately respond to the extremely urgent threat of climate change. If humanity misses this opportunity to avoid climate disaster, we will all bitterly regret our failure. Moreover, climate change is a moral issue, since the harm caused by climate change desecrates God's creation and disproportionately affects the world's poor. As a Catholic, I would like to share with you some words of wisdom from the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops and from Pope Francis. First, I'll draw from the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops' statement, Plea for Dialogue, Prudence, and the Common Good, dated June 15, 2001. That's 20 years ago yesterday. At its core, global climate change is not about economic theory or political platforms, nor about partisan advantage or interest group pressures. It is about the future of God's creation and the one human family. It is about protecting both the human environment and the natural environment. It is about our human stewardship of God's creation and our responsibility to those who come after us. The common good is built up or diminished by the quality of public debate. With its scientific, technological, economic, political, diplomatic, and religious dimensions, the challenge of global climate change may be the basic test of our democratic processes and political institutions. Grateful for the gift of creation, we invite Catholics and men and women of goodwill in every walk of life to consider with us the moral issues raised by the environmental crisis. These are matters of powerful urgency and major consequence. They constitute an exceptional call to conversion. Now I'd like to draw from Pope Francis. This is from his encyclical Laudato Si on care for our common home, issued 6 years ago in 2015. As often occurs in periods of deep crisis, which required bold decisions, we are tempted to think that what is happening is not entirely clear. Superficially, apart from a few obvious signs of pollution and deterioration, things do not look that serious, and the planet could continue as it is for some time. Such evasiveness serves as a license to carrying on with our present lifestyles and models of production and consumption. This is the way human beings contrive to feed their self-destructive vices, trying not to see them, trying not to acknowledge them, delaying the important decisions and pretending that nothing will happen. So, speaking now in my own name, I implore you, such a temptation to delay our city's response to climate change must be resisted. The stakes are high. I urge you to take bold action without delay. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to address council at this time? Yes, please come forward. And would you please state your name and address for the record?
Ann Henriksen, Zealand. I speak today out of respect and dignity for all people. I was here last week for your study session. I heard comments about Holland and its tradition, wanting to keep its reputation in line with its history, beauty, and wonderful place for all to live here. In December 2019, Reverend Jennifer Adams and Jeffrey Sorensen requested the City of Holland Council pass an anti-discrimination ordinance for housing and employment concerning LGBTQ persons in Holland. The formal title was Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. This is in line with Mayor Box and Lynn Raymond's campaign promise. The LGBT audience appealed to the council to pass an ordinance. Their plea was exactly the same as in 2011, but just by another name. In 2011, it failed. In 2011, council said if the state government passed an LGBTQ law, they would comply with it. As you know, the Michigan state government has not passed any such law as yet. A motion requested the city manager and city attorney construct a document worded in compliance with the proposed ordinance. Due to delays, the LGBTQ Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Ordinance was presented in the summer of 2020. Curiously, the Holland LGBTQ ordinance was designed by the State of Michigan's Civil Rights Anti-Discrimination Commission. This commission had willfully fashioned Holland's ordinance by redefining the word sex. Our Michigan Constitution defines sex as prohibiting sex discrimination against any male or female. However, the Michigan Commission, under the Attorney General Dana Nessel, changed sex to mean sexual orientation, gender identity, and gender expression. Therefore, any LGBTQ discrimination case sent to them from the Holland ordinance would be judged, considered in light of the newly defined wording. So the question is your LGBTQ Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion ordinance illegal because it operates under the Michigan Commission and not under the Michigan Constitution? The wording sex in the Elliott Larson Civil Rights Anti-Discrimination Law can only be changed by a congressional vote, not on a commission's decision. Who advised the city manager and attorney to refer to the Michigan Commission for the Holland ordinance? Was it someone in a lawyer hat? Before his 2019 election, Nathan Box was chairman of the board of the taxpayer donation-funded Civic Center for community activities. Without notifying the city mayor or the city council, he and the board invited a GR drag company to perform 2 shows in the Civic Center on a Sunday, adults only. Another drag performance returned at a later date with accommodations for 15 scholarships offered to families to bring their children to an adult performance. 2021, on his own volition without the council's approval, Nathan Box has bold a monumental proclamation. The City of Holland will observe June as LGBTQ month. Apparently, there are 2 more years for Mayor Box. Will June 2022 bring, as I speak from other events in other communities, LGBTQ Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Parade, a Tulip Time drag float, rainbows lining 8th Street on the whole month of June, drag stories in the library, queer and gender programs for our senior living center, and I'll speak to that at another time. With all due respect to Mayor Box, I am speaking with respect and dignity because of the lack of consideration for the faith, history, and traditions in this good city by the mayor and this council. You are accountable. Stand up.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to address council at this time? Seeing none, I will close the public comment period. Next item on our agenda is special order of the day, public hearing, transportation services, public hearing of necessity, and adopt a resolution in regard to 10th Street Snowmelt improvements. Mr. Van Beek.
Yes, thank you, Mayor and Council. With us tonight is Transportation Services Director Brian White. All of you have heard about this once, and it's been on your agenda twice, because this is that Brian Lynn dedicated 3-step process to get something done. So Brian will give you an outline of the item on your agenda, which talks about snowmelt improvements on 10th Street. So thanks, Brian.
Okay, good evening, Mayor Box, council members, members of the public, and those tuning in at home. As City Manager Van Beek mentioned, you all have had opportunity in the past couple of sessions to review the work that's being proposed as part of this. Let me see if I can get this clicker to operate. I'm going to get an assist here. There we go. Thank you. So with regard to the snowmelt improvements on 10th Street, we're basically looking at 3 different areas there as shown on the map. The first one on the top there is southwest corner of River Avenue and 10th Street. The middle section there is the block between Central and River Avenue on 10th. And then the lower left there is the northwest quadrant of College and 10th Street. Those areas shown in blue are proposed earmarked for new snowmelt, and the areas in green there represent existing snowmelt. So we're hoping to close some gaps and then add some extensions on the existing system, certainly not introducing any new gaps with this project. As we've done in the past with excuse me, all of our more recent snowmelt projects, the distribution piece of the snowmelt, which is basically everything beyond the mains, the snowmelt mains, we go ahead and share that cost with the adjacent property owners on a 50-50 basis, and then there's some nuances there with that as well. So tonight, we're basically looking for obviously holding the public hearing. We have received some comments that are in your packet as well. Those are supportive. And then I think there was one recent one, Kathy, from the folks at Lemire, who I think that's also in your packet as well. So again, hoping to hold the public hearing today, and then looking for support on the resolution that's included in the packet to go ahead and proceed with the project and the improvements as proposed.
Great. Thank you, Brian.
Yep.
Any questions for Brian before public comment or before public hearing? Mike.
Yeah, that too. Brian, Centennial Park has always been a little bit of a thorn in my side because we've nitpicked that thing. When are we going to finish that?
From a snowmelt
From a
standpoint?
I mean, the most critical part of that is River Avenue. And we really were never close before. When we did Central Avenue, that made sense. Now we're right at the corner.
Yep.
Why are we not completing that?
Well, so I can tell you that we are teeing it up for future work. So there's a box that we're going to put at the southeast corner there to continue down to the south. Again, I guess in my mind, there's a catalyst there, hopefully in the future, that we can do that with. And then additionally too, on the 12th Street side, as well as you know, that's not complete yet. There's some underlying main work that we would like to do. Those are probably going to have to be located under the existing sidewalk. So it's a bigger effort, if you will, to get completely around Centennial Park. And I'm just, to me, there's a project in the future that probably would involve snowmelt mains where we would tie all that together. So we're almost there, but we're not quite.
Your Honor,
Yes, Dave?
just a quick clarification. I noted the letter of support that we got in the packet. As far as anyone else on the assessment roll, it's been accepted pretty well?
Yeah, as I mentioned in the prior meeting, and there may be some folks in the audience tonight that do step up. It wasn't unanimous. I reached out to the management group there at the one condo facility there next to the old post office. So I've been just working with the association there, representatives from there. So I have not had a touch with each of the 41 different reps, so it's hard to say where everyone's going to land on that. I do know, talking with the management folks there, that there were some folks that were questioning, and maybe not so much in favor of this.
I just noticed a couple of the larger assessments, like Pillar was pretty large. They're cool with it.
And that's why I put that in the packet. So the two larger ones, Pillar and then the folks at the south west corner there, those folks are in support of it. Actually reached out to us. Yep.
Okay,
Yep,
thanks.
you bet.
Any other questions? Great. Thank you, Brian.
Okay, thanks.
I will now open the public hearing. Is there any member of the public who would like to speak to council in regard to this issue? This is your opportunity. Seeing none, I will close the public hearing. What is the pleasure of council in regard to this item?
Move that we approve.
Moved by Hoekstra. Is there support?
Support.
Support by Trethewey. Any discussion? Kathy, would you please call the roll?
Garcia,
Yes.
Trethewey,
Yes.
Arnshorst,
Yes.
Corbin, Hoekstra,
Yes.
Raymond,
Yes.
Peters, Mayor Box.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you, Kathy. Next item, item number 9, written petitions and communications. In addition to allowing for in-person public comment during our meetings, we do also have an email address for those people who are not able to make it to the meeting or who may still not be comfortable coming into the public forum. That is publiccomment@cityofholland.com. We collect all of those in the interim, the 2 weeks in between our regular meetings. Council does read all of those. We do not read them out loud at the meeting, but we do enter them into the record. We accept them in one vote. And what is the pleasure of council in regard to our e-comments?
Move that we accept the comments into the record.
Moved by Arnshorst. Is there a support for that?
Support.
Support by Garcia. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed, same sign. Motion passes. Next, adoption of ordinances. Planning Commission proposed rezoning of 829 East 24th Street from the AGR Agricultural District to the PUD Planned Unit Development District. Mr. Van Beek.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Senior Planner Jenna Ellswick is in the lobby and can speak to this, but I will let you know, you probably noticed in your packet that we're recommending tabling this item this evening. So you can ask questions about what's in your packet, but again, this was tabled at the Planning Commission, and this hearing had already been set before you, so that's why the recommended motion at this point is to table and then let Planning Commission take final action and recommendation before sending on to you.
Great.
Did
Thank
I miss
you.
anything, Jenna?
I'm sorry, I'm not aware of what you were talking about.
We're tabling, just the recommended tabling of the 24th Street rezoning.
Yes, yes.
All right.
That's all right. You were doing work out there, I know.
Questions from council? Motion?
Do we have a specific date to table, or is it indefinite?
I believe Planning Commission has tabled it to their June 22nd meeting. Is that correct, Jenna?
No, this is for Rest Haven. So
Okay.
the July 13th is when it's coming to Planning Commission again. So hopefully a decision will be made by then. And then that would mean that it would come to your
21, July 21?
July 21st meeting, yeah.
So would you like to table it to July 21st? Is that?
Well, I'm fine tabling it indefinitely in case there's a snafu or something, so I guess I would make that motion to table it indefinitely.
All right. Motion is to table this indefinitely, allowing Planning Commission to work on it still some more. Is there support for the motion?
Support.
Support by Garcia. Is there any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Oh, Ron, did you have a question?
I was just going to mention that tabling motion doesn't allow for discussion.
Oh, all right then.
But-
Well, then we won't have any. We'll have none of it.
Zip my mouth.
Yes. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, same sign. Motion carries without discussion. Reports from boards, city offices, and commissions. Energy Services Project Solar Authorizations. Mr. Coster's here. Good evening, Dave.
Yes, thank you, and Mr. Coster's here, so good evening, Dave.
Good evening, City Manager. Good evening, Mayor, members of City Council. Nice to be with you this evening. Excited to be able to share with you a recommendation that's come through the Holland Board of Public Works for supplement to our power supply, and the City Manager's getting up to date there on the slide deck. If you go ahead and move to the first slide here. Thought we'd just spend a little bit of time ahead of these, the actual recommendation to give you a little bit of history and where we are in terms of our electric portfolio, especially as it relates to renewable energy, because we have worked over time to actually bring in resources and layer those in. This has been a long-standing practice of the BPW to bring new investments into our portfolio to continue to increase our renewable percentage. And this really kind of started back after the Community Energy Plan and the work of the Power for the 21st Century initiative, and that culmination of that work and the recommendations associated with shutting down the DeYoung plan and building Holland Energy Park. And at the time, investing in a couple of large wind power purchase agreements. Well, even before that, we had even entered into some agreements for landfill gas. And so if you see the bar graph there, it represents the percentage of our portfolio that was made up by renewable resources over time and what the different types of supply sources those were. And at first, it was primarily landfill gas and a small amount of biomass. We actually had a power purchase agreement from a wood burner up in Grayling, Michigan, actually, for a period of time. But then after the wind contracts came in, you see we saw a pretty big jump in the actual percentage. And it's continued to climb over the years, except for 2019. There's a little bit of downturn there. One of the wind farms that we have a contract for had a lot of lightning strikes. And so they were going through a process of evaluating and fixing the condition there that was causing a lot of that damage. But you could see our plan is that continuing to kind of go up into our budget for this next year and our actual experience for this year and then the budget for next year. And then on top of that, we recently took action at the board and the city council to approve solar for the first time, large utility scale solar. The two largest solar arrays in the state of Michigan that were being built were 100% public power supported, and Holland, being one of the members of MPPA, Michigan Public Power Agency, were involved in that transactions, or those two arrays. In total, we have about 13 megawatts of solar coming from those two solar farms, but they're just finishing their construction. One of them is operating now, and the other one is nearing completion of construction, so you'll see that amount kind of ramping up into the future. Well, today we have another opportunity for you to consider, and the next page really just kind of highlights the individual contracts just for your information. You could see that some of them have a lot of life left in them. A lot of them are 20-year type of agreements, 20 to 30-year type of agreements. Some of them are actually rolling off in terms of the landfill gas within this next decade. And we also have a decision to make about one of the wind farms already. It's a 10-year agreement for a wind farm that's in Indiana. And that will be coming up for some consideration here in the not too distant future. You can go on to the next page here if we can. So what's in front of you tonight is a supplement to what we have in that portfolio, and it's two more solar arrays that are being built, large utility scale solar arrays. One of them is located in Hart Township up in Oceana County, and the other one is in Calhoun County. These are larger arrays. They are not, in this particular time, 100% public power funded. They are actually being supported by the developer. In this particular case, one of them in Hart is actually an enterprise that's owned by CMS Energy, It's called CMS Enterprise Corporation, or company, and they're building about a 100 megawatt solar array, of which Michigan Public Power Agency is going to be taking about half of that, or about 50 megawatts. And what's being proposed here is that Holland's amount of that would be another 11.7 megawatts of solar into our portfolio from that particular resource. And at the same time, there's another resource that's been proposed that the Michigan Public Power Agency is acting on, that is being built again in Calhoun County. This is a little bit larger array, 125 megawatts, of which MPPA has a little bit smaller portion of that, 25 megawatts. And again, Holland would be a substantial off-taker in both of these projects for MPPA at 6 megawatts of that 25 that MPPA has. You can see that they have slightly different commercial operation dates. Calhoun will finish up a little bit earlier, near the end of next calendar year. And the commercial operation date for Hart is into 2023 and maybe late 2023, early 2024 timeframe. Wanted to point out a little bit, just so people have an understanding about building a solar array, what's actually involved with that from an acreage standpoint. You can see there that those two projects have about 10 acres per megawatt of solar that is being built. So that's quite a big, put that in relationship to Holland Energy Park, for example, which is built on 26 acres, and it's a 125 megawatt plant on 26 acres. So, land use is a pretty big consideration, and we want to make sure in these particular contracts that, there was strong community support, which there is, and also there's a commitment from these developers to actually restore the properties to their original condition when these solar arrays have lived out their useful life. And so that is a provision in there that they have with those particular communities. What we are getting when we buy this power is you are actually contracting with an entity, and then you have the right to the attributes of those solar arrays. And those attributes in the electric market include the energy that it produces, and also there's what's called a capacity value, because any electric utility in Michigan not only has to meet the energy needs of their customers on an instantaneous basis, but every year they have to demonstrate that they have enough capacity to meet the peak needs of their customers. And so solar, actually, because it's more predictable about when it comes on, can actually provide a capacity value in addition to an energy value. So we actually receive the benefit of that. And any environmental attributes, and sometimes you hear of that in the term of a renewable energy credit or certificate. These resources will produce those, and then they become ours to use for any compliance needs that we have, to be able to use to provide for our customers in a voluntary green pricing program. Should people elect, and they can, to elect up to 100% of their power to come from renewable energy. That's what that renewable energy certificate allows us to be able to demonstrate and to retire on behalf of those that elect that. And then the other thing that's there, you hear about this, the term that's referenced is ancillary services. There are other value propositions that generators have to support the grid operation, and there could be some economic benefit to that as well. And so that is also part of the structure of this contract. Now, Michigan Public Power Agency has evaluated the cost of this contract against the future projected revenue or value that each of those attributes would bring, and has determined that the parts exceed the cost. The sum of the parts the value exceeds the cost of the contract. So it's shown to be a very viable contract. And so that's why they're recommending to the participants at MPPA that we move forward with this agreement. And as our staff, in the next slide, what we've done to try to evaluate that, and I've got a series of graphs here, and basically this is just to show a little bit about how we plan for resources. You can see that currently, we look at both the seasons of the winter and the summer in terms of how these things fit in. It's an important evaluation, because if we buy more than we need in a particular season, then either we constrain other resources that we own and operate, or perhaps we have to sell that power back into the marketplace And then there's a risk associated with what that marketplace will actually bear for that power versus what we are actually contracting it for. So it's important to really look at these things. These graphs here show kind of what our current portfolio would be if all of our external resources are fully being utilized. And it includes all of our renewable resources, all of our external resources like Bell River and Campbell, which we have talked about in the past, the coal-fired resources outside of Holland. And then Holland Energy Park, primarily inside of Holland, is sort of that lowest thing inside the graph. So that's kind of the current state. And if you shift to the next one, Keith, please. This is if we incorporated the new transactions tonight and also renewed the wind contract that I said was coming up in a couple of years, how would that layer in? And what you really, it's subtle here, but you can't see that the orange bar, if everything else kind of stays fully operating, what gets compressed is that orange area underneath there. That's Holland Energy Park kind of being compressed. And that means that if we were to fully utilize these things, then, it starts to compress what we have inside Holland. Or, we have the situation of some of that power being exported, out of Holland potentially. And so it's sort of subtle, but you can kind of see that. What I want to do is, I don't want to belabor all these slides. We have them for a number of different scenarios that we reviewed with the board, but I do want to go down to the last one if we can. And keep going down if you can, a couple more. Oop, one more up, there you go. So this is looking into the future now, which is important because Bell River, we know, retires by the end of this decade coming up. And so what this does show is that layering in these resources and preparing for 2030 does allow us, you actually see in the summertime a little bit of a gap here. You actually see resources that aren't fully being enough to meet the demand expectation in the summertime after Bell River goes away. And so this is a good indication that over this decade, we will have more opportunities to layer in other resources in addition to what this is. So one of the questions you might ask tonight, well, MPPA is building 50 megawatts in this farm, 25 in this farm, why are we only doing 17.7 right now? Well, again, part of it is where we sit today relative to our needs and how that projects into the future. But also, and probably the most important thing, is that when you're making these investments, we have seen a regular trend of the costs of these type of resources continue to come down. And so just like you layer into your investment portfolio to mitigate risk and to make sure that you're taking advantage of a marketplace that's moving, we're managing that by layering in reasonable amounts of these resources. The other thing that it does is now we'll have a solar farm by Battle Creek, we'll have a solar farm up by Hart, we'll have a solar farm in Livingston County, and we'll have another one a little bit north of that. And so what it does is it provides geographic diversity because the clouds aren't always, exactly over Holland, fortunately, and they're not always over Battle Creek. And so having that geographic diversity also gives you the ability to have more predictable amount of power supply as well. So that's a little bit of background and a little bit of lead-in to the fact that what you have in front of you, again, for your consideration tonight, is two resolutions that would essentially be enacted to commit Holland to MPPA, Michigan Public Power Agency's portion of their power supply from these two solar arrays in the amount that we talked about earlier on the slide deck, which was 11.7 megawatts out of the Hart solar array and 6 megawatts out of the Calhoun solar array for the respective terms that are there, those 20-year terms that were identified on that slide deck. So, yeah, if you can go back maybe just to the first, that slide deck there, yeah. So it's that 17.7 and 6 for 20-year terms for each of those projects was for your consideration tonight. One other thing, if I can real quick, if you go back up to the first one, that's the graph there. The other thing I didn't mention, the green line there, just to kind of also show as far as Holland being a leader. I also looked at data that's collected by the Michigan Public Service Commission on the regional average of renewables. And so you can see that over the years, that's actually represented by the green line. So really since the beginning of this graph, we have been at or above, and actually quite a bit above, the regional average for utilities in terms of the renewable percentage in our region. So just another example of us trying to stay ahead of that curve. So with that, I'll stop and see if there are any questions anybody
Great.
has.
Thanks, Dave. Mr. Trethewey?
Dave, I've asked this question before, and it's great to have this diversification, but is the grid going to be able to support us?
Yes, the grid will. I think one of the things that is important to understand, though, is that in the future, I think when you talk about the grid, we're talking about a larger area than just Holland's grid, that there's going to have to be additional investments that are made to incorporate what constitute intermittent resources. I think, one of the things that happened the other day was fairly interesting in that I've really never experienced that before, at least not in the near history. It wasn't summer yet. Thursday came and the hot weather came, and we were called upon to operate every piece of equipment we have in Holland to generate power. And so that was a little bit surprising to me because we have really not resources that normally operate in the market. They're more kind of standby for our purposes, but yet they were called upon to operate. So I think it's important, to keep an eye on this going forward. And certainly I know that all of our entities that are planning our regional transmission are doing the studies to determine what level of capacity and resources, actual resources that can demonstrate their ability to be there when needed, are actually there so that we have the lowest possible probability, and they have to use some sort of planning criteria, but they plan for no loss of retail load, only once in 10 years sort of probability on that throughout the grid. And that's the standard that they use to determine how much each entity has to have and demonstrate for their capacity. But I would say in addition to that, there's going to have to be grid investments in order to meet a changing portfolio over time. There's no doubt about that.
And that's probably going to have to be somebody other than the IOs?
Well, yeah, I mean, actually what's happened over the years, Mike, is that the investor utilities have actually spun off their high voltage transmission. Now there's a major company in Holland, or not in Holland, in Michigan. Primarily the transmission provider is called International Transmission Company, or ITC Holdings, and they are the ones that make most of the transmission investments. But there are more of them in the region than just that. But they have there's a planning process that they go through with the regional grid operator, and they have to make plans to make sure that they have enough transmission support to accommodate and not have an issue with the grid. But those, we invited, I think, all of you, and I'm not trying to criticize those that couldn't attend it, but the Michigan Public Power Agency stakeholder meeting this year had the CEO of the Mid-Continent Independent System Operator, John Baer, talk about integrating renewable intermittent resources into the grid. And it really becomes sticky when you start getting above 30% type of integration of renewable resources, and they're working hard to try to make sure that they can stay ahead of that, but that is a very important consideration, as more renewables get integrated to the grid.
That's going to be the weakest link, I think. You and I have talked about that before. Do they fall under the auspices of MPSC?
The MPSC? No, that's a state regulatory. They fall under the auspices of the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission because it's interstate commerce, so it's really more of a federal role
because
that they
of the
have.
transmission line. Okay.
Yep.
Thanks, Dave.
Other questions? Yes, Scott, and then Nikki.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, so I share your thoughts there about the grid being able to support it, including nuclear power walking away. I mean, I think that's going to be detrimental to our energy source capacity going in the future. But 3 quick questions. The Pullman area, they're having a solar farm being built. Is there any plans to invest there? One, I'll just quickly name them that way you don't have to be interrupted. How many REC credits are we actually obtaining doing this? I mean, I didn't see that in the report, so that's 2. And then you mentioned the restoration of the property in the future. Is there a decommission fund that's being set up, and are we contributing to that, or when we purchase the power?
Let me take them in reverse order. Okay. As far as the decommissioning fund, that's entirely the developer's obligation. Our only obligation is the contract for the purchase of the energy that's coming off the solar arrays. So that's our only obligation, is our contract price. They have all operational risk, development risk, decommissioning responsibility. The price they gave, is sufficient for their resources to be able to deal with that. That's their situation there. And I can get into a little bit about why we contract as opposed to own a little bit. I think one of the things there is we like to own things, but we're not a taxed entity, and taxed entities do have an avenue to actually save money because there's an investment tax credit for solar arrays. So municipals tend to contract for that power, and the developer takes the tax credit and then passes that through in terms of a lower price as a result of that. So that's that. So as far as the credits that we are going to get, the actual certificates, so this actually will represent just under 4% of our energy needs in a year, these two contracts. So when we look at that, and so that's about what is that going to be? About 400,000, I think, megawatt hours of electricity. 40,000 megawatt hours of electricity. And a certificate equals about a megawatt hour of electricity. So it's going to be about 40,000 certificates or credits that come along with that, which is a lot. I mean, if you think about, the needs that either residents would have if they subscribe to the program, or even businesses, we'll start to have a lot of new resources coming in to where we'll have plenty available for those that want to elect to go well beyond their basic amount that they get at the 15% level in our portfolio that is today. And then if you look at the other question was about Pullman, I will tell you this. I don't know specifically about the Pullman one, but I know that to get to these two contracts, there were many developers that came with proposals for MPPA, and MPPA went through a very exhaustive vetting process, looking at the contract terms, looking at price, looking at the guaranteed sort of production capability off from the site. All of those things went into a vetting process, the wherewithal of the developers to actually pull it off. So there's a lot of vetting that went in to narrow what was a fairly large group of developers down to the two that were being recommended at this time. And my guess is they're going to continue to run through that. So, a future one might be vetted, might be Pullman, but right now that's not something that's on Holland's radar specifically. MPPA may be having some conversations with them in the early stages that haven't been brought up to a board level yet at MPPA.
A couple of questions. When we had to be at peak capacity or sell that last month, do we get compensated for that?
Well, we do. We get compensated, but I'll tell you that the compensation was pretty disappointing. So, two things. Every year, when we demonstrate our ability to meet our peak demand, we have to do that by the end of April for the upcoming year. And we submit our data of what we have under contract or ownership and what its capacity value is. Often, if we have more than what we need, we will actually do bilateral transactions with other entities for that. And a lot of times those are other Michigan Public Power Agency members that we're doing that with. That becomes additional net income to the electric utility. And actually, that's the portion that, if you recall, as part of our transfer process with the city, that wholesale component is actually shared 50-50 in terms of the net income benefit with the city, okay? So that's that portion, the actual demonstration. When we ran last week and we exported, or we had more than what we need, then there's actually an hourly price that gets determined, and then we would be the beneficiary of that. I'll tell you that we ran unit number 6, which is an oil-fired unit over by College and 6th Street. And Elsing and Volkers, they probably were surprised to hear it start up because it just doesn't start up that often. The market was only bearing about $60 a megawatt hour, which probably does not cover the variable cost of operation of that plant. So yes, it was interesting that there was this urgent need, but yet you would think the pricing signals would reflect that, and they really didn't, in that time period, sort of reflect what seemed to be the urgency of the situation. But yes, to answer your question, basically there is a compensation mechanism there.
And then with these solar farms that we have diversely located, are we the sole owners, or are there other electrical power?
No, if you go to that chart there, there you go. So again, if you look at this particular one, so the primary developer for Hart, for example, CMS, CMS will probably sell to Consumers Energy, they're the parent company for Consumers Energy, a good portion of that array, so about half of it might go there. And then 50 megawatts are going to go to MPPA, and Holland is just one of the off-takers of that. Most entities in Michigan Public Power Agency are taking a portion of both of these arrays. There's interest throughout the municipal membership. I would say Holland has probably, by percentage and by quantity, some of the highest amounts of it, though.
And are we ever interested, that's my last one, in acquiring energy credits from outside of Michigan? Or some of these?
Well, I mean, that's a, I don't know if we are necessarily, but, you know, we have had discussions, and I know what you're referring to is, you know, facilitating customers' interests in either buying offsets or renewable certificates, which we've discussed a little bit at the strategic development team level a little bit. All of our compliance obligations so far have had to be from Michigan qualified renewable resources. So they had to be in the state or immediately adjacent to the state, like I mentioned, Indiana, but connected to a system that operates in the state of Michigan to be qualified. There were criteria that had to be involved with that. So we can't just get the credit from anywhere and use that to demonstrate our compliance needs. Now, if we ran a system where we were providing a clearinghouse and ability for customers to just buy credits, and we had an a la carte system where they could define which type they want, well, then we might buy and sell for them. But everything that we've had available has been to demonstrate our compliance. So it's been in this particular area, it's been Michigan qualified resources.
Okay, and if, all right.
No, go ahead, go ahead.
So what if these farms that we have in Michigan weren't enough as your portfolio has had to increase for renewable, and if solar is the best way, would we consider acquiring farms in other states that have more solar, or?
Well, I think we're going to have to watch to see what the rules are that develop in Michigan. The energy law that mandated it be in Michigan is just expiring this year for us, and so we will have more flexibility. But future legislative bodies in Michigan might again put some geographic constraints on it. So we'd hate to have a situation where we've done something that doesn't qualify for what we need to do. In the interim, if we exceed it, and I don't think we're really close to that. Now, we're excited about people who have begun electing renewable, and the city and the BPW have done it for our buildings, and we know that others are starting to do that as well. That, you know, we're excited about that, but it's got a little bit of ways to go before it's going to eclipse what we have here. If it did happen in the short run, again, because renewable energy certificates in Michigan are bought and sold, they're actually traded, we can go out and acquire them on behalf of, you know, the customers that want that, and then retire them on their behalf, and they will be, just as ours are, Michigan qualified renewable resources that are up and running. And then as we grow, again, the portfolio over time, as we layer more in, then we'll hopefully stay ahead of that demand on our customers' needs.
Thank you.
Dave?
Yeah, a couple of things. First one's probably pretty quick. It's interesting that you brought up the 6th Street peaker, and listening to the response you gave to Mike and the whole litany of that episode. Is it safe to assume you're not quite ready to give up that peaker yet?
Not tonight, but if you're trying to make a transaction tonight. But no, I think what we are doing, and Keith and I are having a lot of conversations about this. Our staff has done some deeper investigation, doing electrical inspection tests on the unit, doing some what's called borescope inspections, where you get inside and look. And we're trying to get a sense of, you know, over the next 5 to 10 years, you know, what would be the level of expenditure that we'd have to do to really keep it viable. I'll tell you, when we tried to start it, and we did start it, it got running. It didn't nearly get up to where we thought it would on output, and yeah, I mean, it's a 1973 unit. It's not like a 1973 Pinto, but it was still struggling a little bit to kind of get up there and going. So it's going to take some work, and then we've got to look at what is the market gonna bear in terms of value. And again, that value is shared, BPW and city. And it's a lot of conversation about that value proposition, because that's how we do those capacity transactions. And that's really the value that unit number 6 provides, is more of a capacity value than an energy value. So we're gonna have some of those conversations, and I think we're gonna be able to make some more definitive recommendations on that in the not too distant future here.
Yeah, so I'm just checking on that. I have a certain point of view on that, which
I know.
you may or may not be aware of. The other thing I'm just kind of curious about, you talked about the analysis I think the MPPA did on the value versus cost of the solar
Yes.
array and the return on that. Was that difference substantial, or?
It was slightly positive. It wasn't like it was hugely positive, but it gave all of us, I think, a good feeling that the price was very competitive and that the risk was low, relative to what those future projections are. Now, here's the thing. I mean, when we were building Holland Energy Park, we thought that natural gas at the time, which was over $3, was going to grow to $6 and then maybe to $9 over time. And fortunately for all of us, because of the economic advantage that's provided, it stayed at 3 and actually went down to like 2.5. And so, these projections are just projections, right? But it's a hedge. I mean, buying a fixed cost product is a hedge. It's never intended to be exactly perfect in terms of what the relationship will be between that and what if you leave yourself exposed to a marketplace. It's like buying a little bit of insurance. You're saying, I'm going to get a fixed price contract. I'm going to get something that meets the needs of the city from a renewable standpoint as well. And I can feel good about it because the projections show that the value is at least equal to or better, and it was slightly better than what the future projected costs would be if I just bought power, capacity, renewable energy credits, and ancillary services.
Okay.
Yep.
Good, thank you.
Yep, you're welcome.
Any other questions for Dave? Great. Thank you,
Thank you
Dave.
very
Appreciate it. What is the pleasure of council in regard to the energy services solar authorizations?
Motion to adopt recommendations.
Moved by Trethewey. Is there support?
Support?
Support by Hoekstra. Any discussion? Kathy, would you please call the roll?
Trethewey,
Yes.
Arnsworth,
Yes.
Corbin, Hoekstra,
Yes.
Raymond,
Yes.
Peters, Garcia,
Yes.
Mayor Box.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you. Next item 12-1E41, Finance. Do you want to do both of these together, or do you want to do them separately, Mr. Van Beek? 4-1 and 4-2.
No, we'll do those separately.
Okay.
But Lynn will be leading you through the presentation on both. And the first is very much something that we do round about this time every year, which is the year-end budget amendments. And the clicker's out, so you just have to do the old-fashioned. And I think it'll reach all that way, Lynn.
Okay.
So thank you, Lynn, for walking us through this and highlighting our year-end budget amendments.
All right, good evening, Mr. Mayor and members of City Council. See if I can get where I'm supposed to be. Nope.
You're just gonna have to tell me.
All right.
Yeah, you can call me whatever name you want, Lynn, and then that'll be my cue to advance.
Can we help?
All right, that we're good. Okay, included in your packet was the detailed budget amendment for the year end. So I just want to give a quick update about how we do budget amendments. And as you probably know, in January, we always do a mid-year budget amendments. Once we're halfway through, we kind of see where we're at. And then when we do the budget process and we adopt the budget in May, we also go ahead and do the amendment to kind of get it to where we estimate it to be. Well, now we're within just a couple weeks of the end of this year, believe it or not. So we are now going to do our final year-end budget adjustment. And we do that because the state does require that we end the year under budget with regards to expenditures. So included in the packet were those amendments. And I'm just going to highlight a couple of the more significant ones for your information. So I'll begin with general fund revenues. Okay, we actually have some good news with regards to the revenues. So we actually have a budget amendment including $577,059 increase in the general fund revenues. So what makes up those? So the first one I want to talk about is revenue sharing, and we get that from the state, and it's really based on sales and use taxes. And we kind of base our estimates on what they provide as guidelines, and they had really reduced theirs earlier in the year, but now they are seeing sales and use tax really have increased, which reflects what we've all heard. Everybody's spending their money that they've gotten from stimulus. So that's coming through in higher revenues. So we actually are $163,000 ahead of where we thought we would be. The second item is CARES Act funding, and that came in about $182,000 higher. And we were pleasantly surprised. We did get a little extra installment on the public safety portion of that grant. The state had to audit everybody's returns, and some people did not get what they thought they were going to get, and we got a little extra, so that was good news for us. PPT reimbursement, additional $93,000. Again, that's something that comes through the state, and we have a difficult time estimating that. I think we've seen this estimate every year, which is good. At least we were still positive. So we got a little bit more from that. And finally, construction permits. This should be no surprise. We see a lot of building and construction activity, and so our permits are actually up another $141,000, which again is good news. So I will next move to the general fund expenditures. Now here we see, so we did increase these by $95,000, almost $96,000, but again, while it's an increase, we're still going to end up overall with extra $481,000 in our general fund. Most of the expenditure adjustments are really related to when we compare payroll costs to what we had budgeted, and some of our allocations, like the street department, we have an additional $89,000 almost, and that's really a way we allocate because we account for the hours that they actually spend. And some of our streets employees, they actually cover not only general fund but sometimes capital funds, so that's really what that is related to. The transfer to MCIF, we show actually we're going to be able to save $50,000 from, we had earlier brought that back related to the Civic Center, but our Civic Center has reopened, and so it's not quite as bad as we originally had thought. So we're going to actually be able to move $50,000 back to the MCIF fund. Recreation Department, we're actually saving $113,000, and again, now that we've gotten further, we were able to recognize some savings in that area. And finally, contingency, $50,000, that's really kind of an accounting related transaction, but that does flow through as an adjustment. So as I mentioned, we end up putting another $481,000 towards our general fund reserves, which will bring us just slightly higher than our 20% target. But that's actually a good thing. It's going to provide us some cushion as we go into fiscal year 2022. As you may recall from just last month when we passed that budget, we have some challenges ahead of us in fiscal year 22. So that will position us well as we move into that budget. So I do want to point out some other news related to our, it's kind of related to our budget, but you might be asking why it's not in our budget adjustment, and that is the American Rescue Plan Act. So we all know cities received their money. We were actually awarded $8.4 million. We actually have received our first half of that. And just as a reminder, that is the funds that are coming through as from the federal government. We received ours directly, and we have to determine what we're going to spend those on by December 31st, 2024, and then actually spend it by December 31st, 2026. But this is not included as a budget amendment item, and I'll kind of explain why. So since we've received, even before we actually received the money, we have listened to every webinar we could, and we are reading every articles that are published by our professional organizations, and we are up to pages and pages of the FAQs on how we can use these funds, how we have to account for the funds. And so we still are in that stage. We're still in that stage of gathering information. And so we want to be very mindful with how we use these funds. And so we are going to make sure we have all the information gathered and then bring it back for a thoughtful discussion on that topic. So at this point, it would be not prudent to include it in a budget amendment because I just don't think we have enough information to make those decisions. So with that, I can answer any questions on the presentation this evening or anything that was included in your packet.
Questions from council? Yeah, Dave.
On your last point, where does that 4.2 million reside? Is it buried in the parking lot somewhere? I don't.
Right, no. So again, the guidance is, so absent completely definitive guidance, we have elected to create a special fund. We are tracking in a special fund because with, just like grants, you always have to demonstrate accountability for it. So we have it in a special fund from accounting purposes, and then we've actually created a special count for the investment, the actual investment, so we can definitely track any investment earnings, because similar to grants, typically those are subject to the same restrictions. So,
we are allowed to invest that and gain something on it?
Right now, we have a very conservative investment,
Yeah.
right?
Okay.
Because we, again, once we determine you can invest it, but once we would need to determine what those uses are going to be and what the timing of those uses would be before we would commit to any certain type of fixed income maturity date. So, and that'll be part of the analysis that we ultimately do as well.
Okay, thank you.
Scott?
Those revenues from those investments, do they have to be actually used on the grant for the purpose it was intended as well?
That's what we believe at this point.
Okay.
Again, that's part of the questions that
Just wanted to
keep
make sure
asked.
I'm sorry about that.
Oh, that's good.
No, that was good. I was going to say the same thing. I was like, hey, Lynn, have you seen the most recent webinar or 1,000-page release? Because there's still a lot of questions out there as to the interest earnings. Can you keep it? What can you use it on? Can you put it in your general fund? So, exactly. So that's why Lynn is exactly right, and I support that 100%. We're being intentional. We're being cautious. And we certainly are not without generating ideas, and we've certainly talked with you about one of the primary ideas that was the cornerstone of this money was first suggested is broadband. So I think that's still going to be a major player in the conversations that we bring back to you. But we will continue to be cautious as the news changes daily.
Yep.
Any other questions? Jay?
So, I think Ottawa County in the same, I don't know if it's the same American Rescue Plan Act, it's like $57 million or some such number. I know they've formed a committee of some sorts to put some heads together and think about how we want to do that. Is there an opportunity to have a conversation with council before a recommendation comes to get some sense of a good idea about what are the ways it can be spent? Because otherwise, you really don't get any, I know kind of what my constituents think about and what's important to them, and broadband is certainly a good one. I would put that on the list as well, but there may be others. And if we don't have a chance to kind of talk about that before you go and throw up some recommendation together, you really don't get any public input that way. So I just wonder if there's an opportunity for that. Thank you.
Yeah, we're certainly not suggesting that we're not going to have public input or your input. I'm on that. I've been invited to be, and I think it makes sense that I'm on that task force for Ottawa County. I know Allegan County is doing a similar process. The county's situation is a little bit different, where the realm of what they're responsible for, or at least have say in as it relates to health and community mental health and some of those uses, I think is one of the reasons why they're having probably a wider field of possibilities of what to use that money for. But Jay, certainly us saying we haven't started a process does not mean that we're not going to involve all of you.
All right, any other questions? What is the pleasure of council in regard to the fiscal year 2021 year-end budget amendments?
Motion to adopt the recommendation to approve the 21 year-end budget amendments and for the finance director to be authorized to make the necessary transfers and amendments as described.
Moved by Trethewey. Is there support for that incredibly detailed motion?
Support, I think. Yeah, sure.
And there is support that is not quite as detailed, but is definitely strong. Is there any discussion? Seeing none. Kathy, would you please call the roll?
Arnshorst?
Yes.
Corbin?
Yes.
Hoekstra?
Yes.
Raymond?
Yes.
Peters?
Yes.
Garcia?
Yes.
Trethewey?
Yes.
Mayor Box?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you. Next item, 12-1E, 4.2, fiscal year 2022, insurance services renewal with A.J. Gallagher. Mr. Van Beek.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. And here's one of those additional times where when you're working with a relatively new department head and you think you know a lot about them, and then you find out something new. And what we found out about Lynn is that she has a pretty thorough history in doing this type of insurance renewal and some pool history in Illinois. And it just makes all of us look good because we hired a very talented person. I'm not going to say anything more than that. She'll walk you through some of the challenges that we had in this renewal, up to and including that this is late and kind of out of order with the Board of Public Works, and yet we feel we're making a good recommendation to you tonight and definitely are doing that with recommendation. But Lynn, walk us through the specifics if you would, please.
Thank you. And if you could just advance a couple. There you go. Thank you. Okay, yes, as Keith mentioned, we are in the insurance renewal phase, and I just want to give you just a brief reminder how the process works here at the city. So our coverage period is actually for the time frame of July 1st to June 30th. And Gallagher serves as our city's agent of record and has done so for the past 7 years. And normally around the January timeframe, we have a mid-year review and plan, which we did this year. And then it's up to them as our agent to seek quotes and get that package assembled. And those quotes were due 45 days prior to renewal. Gallagher is responsible for assembling the package and then submitting it to the city and the Holland Board of Public Works for a joint review. And so they are very aware of our timing. And unfortunately, this year, I do apologize, as Keith mentioned, for getting it to you late because we received the information on Monday of this week. So again, apologies on that, but we have worked with the Holland Board of Public Works, Chuck and Dave and Keith and I, and we've really taken a detailed look at the numbers. So I kind of want to walk you through what this year's renewal looks like. First of all, the current market, I'm not sure, but you might have seen in the news, we've had a challenging year. So we had already seen in the prior years some continued increase in natural disasters, and that always, of course, the storms and wildfires, that leads to increased insurance cost. And then the pandemic, that created uncertainty for many and definitely in the insurance markets. And then finally, the current legal environment. We've seen some large jury awards, and all those kind of made this year what they called a hard market. And what does that kind of mean? That really means we got a renewal rate that came in almost 14% higher than the prior year. So I kind of want to walk through what that looks like and which areas we see that in. And this chart, I apologize, it gets a little smaller. So as we see here, we have the coverage areas of like work comp. Again, this year we actually had a decrease in that, which was great. But liability and excess property, those are some of the areas which are impacted by those challenges I just mentioned. And so we've historically had 20 million of coverage in those two areas, in that area. And so we have an increase of almost 33% in liability coverage and excess property almost 14%. The other huge increase, which is not so huge dollar-wise, but it is worth noting on the percent, is if you look down to cyber liability. Well, of course, the headlines, obviously that's why we're at almost a 75% increase in the cyber liability. In fact, they had, I think that it was this carrier, they had difficulty finding. They said a lot of carriers in the cyber market are going away. They're just not offering coverage. So, so the total is, presented for approval is $1.4 million, or a 13.7% increase. And again, I mentioned we work jointly with the Holland Board of Public Works, and so we have that allocated, and this year the allocation will be $464,670 for the city and $962,918 for the Holland Board of Public Works, and we shared equally in that increase of 13.7%. I do want to talk a little bit about some changes we're recommending for this year. And so coverage changes from the prior year. So we looked and really worked hard to figure out how we could make this a reasonable renewal. So we looked at something called a self-insured retention. It's kind of what we would think of as our personal deductible. So like at home, if we increase our deductible on car insurance, we know we get a little lower rate. So we looked at, we currently have $100,000 per incident, or $300,000 aggregate retention, and we looked and got some quotes as to what would happen if we increase that. And so we are proposing $250,000 individual and $400,000 increase. And why? So I will tell you, we don't just do that because we just throw a dart at it. What we do is we do careful analysis, and what we did was we looked at our claims history since 2011, and we noted we have very favorable claims experience. Very few came anywhere close to the $100,000 limit. We did have two. So we felt like our claims history supported the move. And then the next thing we looked at was our reserve position. As you know, both the city and the Holland Board of Public Works carefully manage our finances, and we have adequate reserves. So we felt like our reserve positions at both entities were sufficient to handle, you have to think, well, what could happen, right? So you have to make sure you have money set aside just in case. And so we feel like we do. And then this is one area too where it is dependent on what your program management. If we have a well-managed program, we are going to have the ability to keep our claims in check. We, as opposed to if we had a program that we didn't feel like we were managing internally. When we get a claims, we have a process that we go through, and we act quickly, and that helps your claims from elevating too far. So we felt like our program management is good, and then that is really reflected in our claims history as well. So the proposal you have in front of you is including that proposed increase in the retention, and the savings on that is $51,096 annually. So finally, in case anybody was missing this chart.
And she can describe this in great detail if you all would like.
I like the colors.
This chart was included in your packet in the executive summary, and it just kind of does show, it kind of shows what carriers. So we have a complex kind of structure, right? To get our insurance coverage that we need, we have a lot of things going on. And so we can't just go to State Farm or Allstate. So we have to go through a whole bunch of different ones and find the best fit for our coverage. And so this is just informational purposes in your packet. It kind of tells you which carrier provided which coverage level, and it's kind of interesting just to look to see the different areas that we have. Yeah, right. Lots of colors. So with that, I'd be happy to, and so yes, we are out of the normal cycle. So normally we would probably, with a change like this, might have even come to study session. So we given the timing, that did not work. And then we're out of the cycle with the Holland Board of Public Works, but we reviewed it with their management, and they're going to recommend approval of this program, and it is scheduled to be on a meeting that is scheduled at Board of Public Works for June 28th. So I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Okay. Mike?
When it begs one to ask the question, what was their excuse for being 30 days late?
Right, so they were mentioned difficulty in getting the carriers to respond, And then they talked about that they had 45 days, at which point that would be May 15th. So they just really didn't have that great of an excuse, just they just said it was a difficult market. And we did ask that question.
Did they convey to you or communicate with you that they were going to be late prior to, obviously you went after them and said, hey, you're due, where is it?
Right. Both the Holland Board of Public Works and the city staff had reached out because we know that we have these dates, as do they, and it was on their schedule from the documents from the mid-year review when these dates were required. So we did inquire, and we did ask.
How many more years contract do we have with Gallagher?
Well, we are not, this is the last year, so we had already discussed with Holland Board of Public Works. We will be going out. It's time to go just look at our options, go for RFP or RFQ. And we also do plan to review that allocation between the Holland Board of Public Works and the city, just to make sure we've got the best, most transparent methodology for that allocation process that we can have. So,
thank you.
Other questions?
I just have a comment. Just like with the budget, you make us feel smart and like we understand this. So thank you. I mean, it's done very well.
You're welcome, and thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Thank you, Lynn. Appreciate it.
Yep.
What is the pleasure of council in regard to the fiscal year 2022 insurance services renewal with A.J. Gallagher?
Move we approve?
Moved by Hoekstra. Is there support?
Support.
Support by Ernst. Any discussion? Kathy, would you please call the roll?
Corbin? Hoekstra?
Yes.
Raymond?
Yes.
Peters? Garcia?
Yes.
Trethewey?
Yes.
Arnshorst?
Yes.
Mayor Box?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Great. Thank you, Kathy. Next item, 12E6.1, gifts. Kathy, would you please review the gifts for us?
The city manager's office is pleased to report the following gifts: Parks and Recreation, Bowles Pool entry fees, Bowles family, and Russ's commissary, $4,700. Parks and Recreation, Sal Perez scholarship programs, Recreation Office daily cash receipts, $156. Department of Public Safety, Police Operations, Frederick Heidema, $100. Anonymous Source, $4,950. In-kind donations, Michael Canis, bicycles and bicycle gear valued at $5,293.50. Department of Public Safety, Police Community Policing Program, Meyer Inc., $950. It is recommended that these donations be accepted with appreciation, credited to the appropriate account, and an expression of gratitude be forwarded to said donors.
Great. Thank you, Kathy. What is the pleasure of council in regard to the gifts?
Motion to accept with appreciation.
Moved by Trethewey. Is there support? Support by Mr. Corbin. Any discussion? I just wanted to point out, I had always paid attention to the fact that often Bowes Pool does not have an entry fee and that someone was covering it, and I did not know until now that it was the Bowes family and Russ's commissary, which makes all the sense in the world. But that is a wonderful gift that they're giving to the community. It's great for all of the people who have the opportunity to use that pool, especially in the warm weather that we've been having recently. So thanks to them and to everyone that's been giving to the city. As Quincy likes to say, it is impressive. Week after week, month after month, all of the gifts that are given to the city of Holland. It's fantastic. So with that, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Item 12E6.2, International Festival of Holland, approval of entertainment agreements. Mr. Van Beek.
Yes, thank you, Mayor and Council, and thank you to Esther for staying here tonight and hearing all the other conversations. You know, this is probably something we could have put on consent agenda, but what we really wanted to do is highlight as much as anything that we are excited about the International Festival and Esther and her committee that are doing this work. So Esther, please come and talk to us about this exciting event.
Mayor Box and members of City Council, I am so excited. I want you all to save the date. August 21st, 2021, we are having the International Festival of Holland. It will be held at the Holland Civic Center, and I feel that this is a very important event for our community. It shows that we are a community that wishes to build a culture of learning of individuals that are not like ourselves and to celebrate the differences. So I just want to give you a very quick sneak preview of the tentative schedule. And some of you may be hearing this for the first time, but you'll be fine. So our welcoming remarks will come from Mayor Box and Councilmember Hoekstra. We have Council General Saife Gonzalez coming from the Consulate of Detroit. We also tentatively have the Pokagon Band of the Potawatomi tribe coming, Ballet Folclórico Sol Azteca, a popular local dance group, Compañeros Flamenco, our Spanish dancers, Rayon Taiko, the Japanese drummers, Sanjita, the Indian dancer, Gratitude Steel Band, who does calypso, reggae, and gospel music, Tumbao Bravo, who does Latin cha-cha, salsa music, and then we have Blackthorn, a cultic group that will also be performing this year. So I would also like to emphasize the events that we have happening for our children. So our children will again be getting passports to the world. We will be making passports for them and sending them to different tables where they will be working on African beadwork, Grecian pottery, Indian Rangoli tiles, and Mexican paper making. We have also allotted some time for the children to have their own special entertainment. Sanjita, Gratitude Steel Band, and the 12-string guitarist will be working with them. So I just wanted to give you a sneak preview. I hope you're all excited. And finally, I just want to share with you that this Saturday we will be having the Juneteenth celebration at Collin Park. The event will occur from 4 to 9 p.m. The city is a silver sponsor, and we will also be hosting the cake and punch table for the class of 2021. So I hope that you will make some time to pop in and check in. So thank you very much.
Great. Thank you, Esther. Any questions for Esther in regard to the International Festival Entertainment Agreements? All right. What is the pleasure of council?
Move that we adopt the recommendation.
A move by Hoekstra. Is there support?
Support.
Support by Airshorst. Any discussion? All right. Kathy, would you please call the roll?
Hoekstra?
Yes.
Raymond?
Yes.
Peters?
Yes.
Garcia?
Yes.
Truthui?
Yes.
Arnshorst?
Yes.
Corbin?
Yes.
Mayor Box?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Great. Thank you, Kathy. I have a number of appointments. Oh, did I skip over you, Mr. Van Beek? I did. Oh, almost did. Almost got away with it. Mr. Van Beek.
I'll make it easy. Nothing this evening, Mr. Mayor.
Oh, wonderful. Well, no, that's not wonderful. It's just always nice to hear your voice. Wonderful that I actually almost did it by accident. Appointments and communications from the mayor. I have a number of appointments this evening. I would ask that the council please accept the appointments of Matthew Weirmeyer to the Human Relations Commission for a partial term, said partial term expiring on June 30 of 2022. Mr. Weirmeyer will replace Commissioner Ron Price. Ryan Spencer to the Compensation Commission for a partial term, said partial term expiring on June 30 of 2025. Mr. Spencer will replace Commissioner Tim Vreeman. Carolyn Maloof to the Holland Board of Public Works Board for her first full term, said term expiring on June 30, 2026. Ms. Maloof will replace Board Member Diane Hayworth, who will term out on June 30 of 2021. And also please accept the reappointment of Ruth Stegeman to the Human Relations Commission for her second full term, said full term expiring on June 30 of 2024. Tom Shibley to the Neighborhood Improvement Commission committee for his second full term, said full term expiring on June 30, 2024. And Rhonda Petzak to the Herrick District Library Board for her second full term, said term expiring on June 30 of 2025. And also, please accept the resignations of Ron Price from the Human Relations Commission, effective November 18 of 2020, and Tim Vreeman from the Compensation Commission, effective on June 16 of 2021.
I will make that in the form of a motion, Mr. Mayor.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Trethewey. Is there support? Support by Mr. Garcia. Any discussion? All right. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed, same sign. Motion passes. Next item, I have a mayoral proclamation this evening in regard to Juneteenth, which was just mentioned by Esther. Whereas on June 19 of 1865, 2 years after President Lincoln issued the Emancipation Proclamation in 1863, Union Army General Gordon Granger landed in Galveston, Texas, and read General Order Number 3, informing the final group of Black Americans that they were no longer enslaved, but that they were free and that they were equal in personal and property rights with their former masters. And whereas, acting as the date of emancipation, June 19 became a long-standing day of celebration, known as Juneteenth, honoring African American resilience and the end of slavery and encouraging unity and respect for all cultures. And whereas the celebration of Juneteenth is inclusive of all races, ethnicities, religions, and nationalities, and that residents across our city and country join hands in acknowledging a period in our history that has influenced our society, a great society that advances the ideals of liberty and justice for all. And whereas we are reminded that Black Americans face systemic racism every day, and that Juneteenth is an important reminder of the work that must continue to deliver equity and opportunity to every community. And whereas the City of Holland adopted Ordinance 1784 to disrupt structural and institutional racism and discrimination, to build on the contributions made by the Black community in all communities, and to illustrate the city's commitment to operationalizing racial equity in its work. And whereas the City of Holland stands in support of the I Am Academy in their and our collective work to empower African American adolescents to achieve their full potential by centering their identity, cultivating relationships, supporting educational success, providing college experiences, facilitating job readiness, and supporting educational readiness, ultimately changing the narrative and trajectory of our African American community. Now, therefore, I, Nathan Box, Mayor of the City of Holland, Michigan, and members of the Holland City Council proclaim that the City of Holland will observe June 19 as Juneteenth. As part of our commitment to anti-racism, racial and social justice, encouraging a day of reflection, recognition, acknowledgement, and healing, we encourage all Holland residents to recognize the continued need to build a society that is more just, peaceful, and prosperous for all. Further, we encourage the community participation at the Juneteenth celebration at Collin Park on June 19, 2021, from 4 p.m. until 8 p.m. Given under my hand and the seal of the City of Holland, the 16th day of June, 2021, Mayor Nathan Box. Thank you. And that is all that I have this evening. Item number 15, appointments, motions, and communications from council members. Council reappointments to city boards and commissions. Mr. Trethewey.
Yes, I have one recommendation for two people to the same board. In the form of a motion, the City Council reappoint David Bauer and John Bedard to the Board of Appeals. Both terms will be ending on June 30, 2024. This is Mr. Bauer's second full term and Mr. Bedard's first full term. That is in the form of a motion.
Right. Thank you, Mr. Trethewey. Is there support for that motion? Support by Mr. Hoekstra. Any discussion? And all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Any other appointments, motions, or communications from council members? Seeing none, and I do not believe we have any first readings of, oh, I'm sorry, Nikki, yes, go right ahead.
Look this way. Yes, I do want to report on the strategic development team that we had Monday. And this must be your lucky day because I can't find my paper, so I'm going to make it up. But this was after 10 months, our chair, Brian Peugeot, and vice chair, Travis Williams, compiled and coalesced all of our work into essentially 5 papers which replaces a kind of a longer, unwieldy document. So I downloaded them. We discussed the different levers, which are the categories such as electric portfolio, building energy consumption, education, transportation, carbon credits, carbon offsets. And then under each, we'd have a goal, and then a strategy, and a target. So for instance, you'd have the key lever, building energy consumption. Goal was to reduce carbon emissions in the environment. And a target was to establish baseline energy metrics. And then how do you do that? What's our strategy? So after 2.5 hours, we didn't finish them all, of course, not even discussing the goals. So the finish line, we can sort of see, but it's not quite there. So that's that. So that was good. And then I always have, those are the facts, and now we have my take on it. And my take is a few things. One is I'm very glad this is getting done. Everybody's working together well. And I'm always aware as a member of council, I'm with Scott Corbin, the council representatives, and I think back to that day in January we had the council advance, and one of our visions, along with affordable housing and anti-discrimination, was to look at climate change. And I remember saying, because I got pretty excited about this, with the climate crisis, and Councilman Terthui said, wait a minute, we said we'd look at climate change. We're not crisis, there are nothing added on to that, just look at that. And you were right. So as we are looking at this and we're coming up with our discussion and our verbiage, I'm not sure that this SDT was kind of where I expected climate change to be addressed, and it's really not. We are coming up with goals and strategies to reduce carbon emissions, and we are saying, we're continuing on with the community energy plan. And as you listen to Dave Koster, he is on it. Holland is, again, one of the most progressive cities in the United States for reducing carbon emissions, for being energy aware and doing things. There's a lot of talk. There's not always a lot of action in the cities that we've benchmarked. So it's kind of an interesting tension from my point of view. Is this really addressing climate change, or are we just looking at the community energy plan and checking off these boxes? Dave Koster could do a lot of this himself. We could say, okay, let's reduce our carbon emissions. He knows this material. This is his field, and he keeps up nationally, internationally. So it's an interesting kind of thing, and maybe you want to add to that anything that you feel, and maybe you're not feeling that tension or that the disconnect. I mean, what is our goal, the SDT's goal? What was council's vision as far as climate change? And maybe we need to say we have a climate action plan for sustainability, because sustainability is one of the overriding terms, as opposed to climate change or energy plan. It really comes under the umbrella of sustainability. So anyhow, that's where we are, and we will continue to work on this in 2 weeks. And you may look on the website under our agenda, and this material is here, so feel free. Mr. Corbin.
Yes, to add on to that, I think the committee itself is realizing how complex this is. This is not just a Holland issue. right? We all know that. And it's a regional issue, and we have a lot of regional partners. Our BPW doesn't just service the city of Holland. So integrating all of our ideas that will seek or get, will have outcomes that a lot of people desire, may not get there. I mean, it's going to be a monumental task, I think, to reach some of these lofty goals that have been set. But they are goals, and they are some initiatives that we're putting forward. So I think we're making progress. I think we're getting where we need to be. I just think, so, my colleague may not think the same, but I think we're making progress. And in that, what we can do as a city of Holland, and that's what's important. We only have the power and the authority to do within the city that we can. Now, that doesn't mean we can't influence. We can influence, and we can encourage and educate. Those are all important aspects and also levers within our plan. So I think we're doing as much as we can do with the complexity of the partners that we have within the region.
And I will add, that reminded me, I will add, we have yet to complete a community survey, and we have meetings set up to meet with business leaders, community leaders. So we'll get that input, which I think is very important. Thank you.
Thanks to both of you. Yeah, Dave.
A quick question in regard to that. At one point, I think you mentioned October as a target date for completing. Do you have any sense of when this will be completed for our perusal?
Yeah, we hope. I mean, I would hope that nothing else has been said since I mentioned that, but yeah, I think everyone's kind of, you can sense this is a little change. And once we get the information from the business and community, I think that'll make a difference.
Okay, thanks.
Any other communications from council members? Comments? Great, thank you. I would now entertain a motion to go into a closed session to review a written legal opinion with the city attorney.
Can we
go ahead.
take a break before we go to closed session?
Yes,
Yep.
what I would encourage
recess?
you is, it's one of those where I don't think you're gonna take action after you come back. So maybe if you go into closed session, communicate, and then our, Rick can excuse himself from the room while you're taking a break too.
Yep, I like that idea. So we definitely can do that. So entertain a motion to go into closed session to review a legal opinion from the city attorney and for the periodic evaluation of the city manager based upon his written request to do so in a closed session.
Mr. Mayor.
Yes, Mr. City Attorney, thank you. I can't look all of the directions at once. I appreciate the other eyes helping.
I think we got a little over aggressive on the listing there in the agenda. It's really to do the evaluation.
All
no
right.
written opinion.
All right, so we're not going to be asking for a written opinion. I'm guessing you don't have a written opinion to give us, so.
Well, he could.
And it's not because you haven't done your homework, it's just because we didn't ask you for that. So, all right, so I'm entertaining a motion to go into closed session only for the periodic evaluation of the city manager based upon his written request to do so in a closed session.
So moved.
Moved by Trethewey. Is there support?
Support.
Support by Hoekstra. Any discussion? Kathy, would you please call the roll?
Raymond?
Yes.
Peters? Yes. Garcia?
Yes.
Trethewey?
Yes.
Arnsworth?
Yes.
Corbin? Yes. Hoekstra?
Yes.
Mayor Box?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you. We will move into closed session. We will not be engaging in any official business following the closed session. We will just come directly out of the closed session and then adjourn the regular meeting. So with that, have a good evening. You're welcome to wait outside if you'd like to, but all you'll hear us do is adjourn at the end of the closed session. And in the meantime, while we're waiting for things to get shut down, we'll give council members the opportunity to take a little break.